Hello, everyone. See folks starting to tune in. Hello. We are just getting started right now with our second Instagram Live here on our Advocis Instagram account. Last week, in case you missed it, we were speaking all about money basics. And we've got a replay for all you folks on our Instagram Live, but also if you're interested in seeing our podcast, our member articles, and latest in the news during Financial Literacy Month, check us out at www.financialliteracyforall.com. We've conveniently placed that link in our bio on our Instagram page. And we look forward to hearing from you folks on some of your thoughts about financial literacy on our social media accounts. Hello. I'm going to start waving to everybody. We are now waiting for our guest speaker here, Mike Reilly. He's going to be speaking all about buying basics, because that is our theme this week. Last week was all about money basics, and this week it's about buying basics. So credit cards, car loans, buying a house, and all of that. So let's see. I think we've got him here. We're just starting the live. Mike, you with us?
Yes, I am. There's an empty chair that's about to be filled by me.
Hello. Good to see you. Can you hear me? Thumbs up. Everything's good?
I can hear you. Can you hear me, Emily?
I can hear you loud and clear. We're good.
Fantastic. And how's the picture?
It's clear as day for me. Hopefully, I don't see any problems so far in the comments box. But folks, if you have any questions, comments, feel free to include it in the comment box. And if you've got any questions, there's a little Q&A feature at the bottom of your live screen. Feel free to click on that, put your questions, and we'll get to it at the end of the live. So, as Mike had mentioned, I'm Manny, and we're gonna just dive right into our week 2 of Financial Literacy Month. So, Mike, tell me, how's it out west?
Oh, it's fantastic. This is definitely the place to live. Having lived in several different parts of the country, I can tell you that Victoria and Vancouver Island are just great places to visit, and once you come, you'll never want to leave.
Wow. Well, I guess kudos to you. You've lived in different places. I've only ever known Toronto, so I'm very, very much ride or die Toronto, but it's all good. I hear many great.
Well, you've got your whole life ahead of you.
That's true. Well, I still have time to get out BC, but
Yeah.
I know today we are going to be talking all about buying basics because that's our theme this week. But we do have some questions for you, and we wanted to kind of see what your thoughts were about some. Oh, you're good? Are you good? Ready?
Fire away.
Alrighty. So a lot of folks kind of sit there and talk about their credit card loans and their car loans, and loans are the big topic. I know there's so much to capture, but one basic question that we can ask is, how should someone allocate their funds towards debts such as credit cards and car loans? Those are big purchases like the car loans.
Yeah, that's a very common theme in my practice. I work a lot with young families and people just starting out. So in many cases, credit is sort of their first access to cash. Mm-hmm. And I want to make sure that we talk about debt overall too, because I know many people listening in will have heard the terms good debt and bad debt, and they are two different things. Good debt is a circumstance where you're using credit or a loan at a low interest rate in order to purchase an asset that's going to increase in value. So a good example of that is a mortgage for a home. You tend to get a low, and we will talk about mortgages, I'm sure, but the asset is going to increase in value. Another example would be just borrowing to invest. So you borrow money from a financial institution at a low rate of interest and invest it in the stock market, and that increases in value. Bad debt is a circumstance where you've taken out a loan on something that
Mike?
Which becomes difficult to pay, or a combination of the two. And in many cases, I see it with someone buying an expensive truck, brand new off the lot, $45,000 at a high rate of interest because they can only get it through a financing company. Mm-hmm. So knowing that, then the question is, how do you allocate? And that all comes down to a balance of your finances. So depending on your cash flow and your need for expenses, how much you can allocate will depend on a number of factors. But I will say that it's absolutely important to make the minimum payment every month on your credit card debt. And I would add, but the trap that people fall into with this is that they feel that they're making payments towards it by making their minimum payment of $54 a month on their Visa. I would encourage our viewers today to, next time they get a statement, is to flip it over and look at the very, very fine print on the back of their credit card statement. And it will actually tell you if you continue to pay the minimum amount at this interest rate based on your current amount, your payoff date will be, in many cases, it's 30 years from now. So that's a real shock to people to realize that paying their minimum doesn't get them any closer to paying off their debt. So knowing that, at least pay your minimum. Then you have to think about, where do I stand on my monthly allocation? And when I talk to people, to talk to clients about this, I very much encourage them to keep up savings. So what often ends up happening, Amani, is that people will say, I can't do any saving until I pay down my debt, which is very typical. I see you nodding your head. You've heard this.
Yes.
And what happens there is, and I certainly encourage that, but without having any savings, and we will probably talk about this too, you end up continuing to use credit as your safety net. Think of it this way: if someone wanted to get into shape and they were overweight, and they would say, well, I'm not going to go to the gym, I'm going to diet and lose weight. And without exercising and building up physical strength and fitness as well, all you've done when you lose weight is become a skinny weakling. You kind of have to do both. You have to increase your physical fitness while you reduce your body size. And in many cases, the physical exercise will help accelerate that. So what I would say to people is, and I can certainly send this out to anyone that wants to know, this is an allocation that I give to my clients. So for all the dollars that come into your house on a monthly basis, an optimum would be putting 10% towards savings, 10% towards your debt, 10% towards some type of insurance to make sure that if something goes wrong, you're okay. You've got to allocate about 30% towards taxes, because the federal and provincial governments are going to demand their share, which leaves you about 40% of your income left over for spending. Now, depending on where you are in your life cycle, those wedges may be slightly skewed, bigger or smaller. But if you can put 10% towards your debt, paying the minimum and increasing while maintaining your savings, you're going to be okay, and you'll be in a much stronger position without sacrificing your ability to save.
Yeah, no, that's actually very brilliant. Like, the thought there is, you hit the nail on the head there. Many people think that if they got debt, they can't really save. So they end up just paying off their debt, nothing gets saved. And at the end of the day, they end up with that analogy that you mentioned when it comes to the gym. You're
Sure.
not, yeah, no, definitely. And I really like that pie chart. Visual is great. If you can send that to me, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, I didn't make it. I've never had an original thought. This is all stuff I've learned from somebody else.
Good to know. No, and it's all good though. But this is all important information that I'm sure all our viewers are, finding very helpful. And of course, everybody that'll be tuning in afterwards to watch the replay will find helpful as well.
Okay.
Now, going into our second question here is, some individuals are not really aware of their finances. So when we sit here and talk about smart consumer choices, what are, some choices individuals can make that, when it comes to smart consumer choices, when they're not really aware of their finances? So if you're not aware of your finances, what are some smart consumer decisions that you can take?
Boy, it's certainly never been more important to be aware than it is right now during our COVID, the impacts and the recovery. And I think the two critical words in your question, Amani, are awareness and choice. Mm-hmm. And being aware is a choice. All of our behaviors are choices. And so someone can choose to be aware of their finances or not. And awareness is just that emotional connection with being interested and engaged, even if it's unpleasant. So, in my own story, I was not always a great person with finances when I was young. I didn't want to think about it. In many cases, the bill would be left unopened on the hall table, and I would deal with it another time. And all that ever did was just compound whatever problem was there with spending. And it wasn't until I started working with a financial advisor myself that that was drawn to my attention, that I was aware that I was choosing to have good or poor behaviors, and those habits then compound. So what I would say, and then of course the thought that goes along with that is, well, I may be having a tough time today. Someday it'll get better, and then everything will be okay. And I now know at 54 that unless I do something, it isn't going to get any better. Good fortune just doesn't fall from the sky and wipe away your problems. So definitely have the courage to take a look at what your spending is and what your income is, because those are really the two factors that you can control. Mm-hmm. So what I would say to people that would like that realize that they need to do something, that they want to be aware, is there's three main things that separate successful people from those who struggle. The first is find an advisor you trust. Advocis is a fantastic organization filled with highly ethical advisors, many of whom, or most of whom, do not charge a fee for the services they provide. I also know many good quality people that work at our regular financial institutions that are not part of Advocis, but at least someone that you trust, that you can ask these questions to. You're going to rip the Band-Aid off. It's not going to hurt as much as you think it's going to. And it isn't going to get any better by leaving it. The second is to have 3 to 6 months of expenses set aside for emergencies or opportunities. We talked about that in the first set of questions about the importance of savings. And so, it's a very old rule that 10% of your paycheck is set aside. I like to tell people at least 3 months of expenses. So figure out what is you need for keeping a roof over your head, food in your stomach, clothes on your back, and getting to work or getting to places you need to be, maybe your communications tools. Those 5 things. Is that $2,100 a month? Is it $1,600 a month? Whatever that number is, multiply it by 3. Have a goal of having that set aside in a cash account for when things go wrong. And that's a tough conversation to have, because people tend to be overly optimistic about their circumstances. Well, I'll never be out of work for 3 months. Well, guess what? We have a pandemic, and there are many people that have been out of work. And if it wasn't for the government, there'd be a lot of folks in real trouble. So it's just a good rule of thumb. And then the last one, and it's something I'm sure many people have heard, is to pay yourself first. So often we allocate all the money that we earn to our bills, to the mortgage, to the rent, to everything else, and our spending, with the intention of saving whatever is left at the end of the month. And most people experience the fact that there is more month than money in most cases. So absolutely pay yourself first, make it automatic, and be deliberate about it. So if the first hour of every day, the first hour is your money to save. So if you make $20 an hour, that first hour you should be saving $20. So that's $100 at the end of every week, $200 bi-weekly. Just take that off the top, and very soon you won't miss it. So in a roundabout way of answering your question about being aware and choices, I think those 3 things. And if you're having trouble with that, I highly recommend this book called The Latte Factor. It's by David Bach, who wrote, was it The Instant Millionaire or Smart Women Finish Rich? He's a number of them. This is an excellent book geared towards younger people who don't quite have control over their spending. Maybe think, well, what's the point? Because I'm never going to be able to own a house. I'm never going to be able to retire. Why even bother trying? It's written from an American point of view, but the rules are still very much the same. I highly recommend this. Get it at the library. That way you don't have to pay for it, and you'll save yourself some money. It's a good book.
The Latte Factor.
The Latte Factor.
That dovetails really nicely into one of the questions I actually wanted to ask you, is to the point that you just made. A lot of millennials sit here and say, well, you know what, there's that slogan where everybody says YOLO, you only live once. So I'm just going to spend my money. I'm going to travel. I'm going to, it doesn't matter. I'll save some point at some point. Is there a piece of like advice that you would give to those? I mean, maybe they're not just millennials, but maybe anybody that has that mentality where it's just like, you only live once. Let me spend my money. Who cares if I save? Because who knows if I'll make it till then.
Yeah, I'm a big advocate for living in the moment and being aware of where you are right now, because this is the only time you can live in. But I would ask anyone that does have that attitude to think back 10 years prior to that and think, where were you 10 years ago, and what did you think your life was going to be like? Would that person 10 years ago, if they could have made choices differently, would that have affected where you are right now? And in many cases, people say, well, yeah, absolutely. I wished I'd not gone out as much, or I wish I'd worked harder in school, or I wish I'd done this or that. And we usually regret the things we don't do. So then you can parallel that and say, well, if 10 years ago you felt like that, how do you think 10 years from now you is going to feel about what you're doing today? And is there something that you can do for 10 years from now you, that would be a gift to them? The internet is full of memes of these sorts of things, that you can only sit under an oak tree today because someone planted an acorn in the past. These human beings have had these same circumstances for a long time. But I think if people feel that same, well, I'm never going to be able to afford a house or retire or anything, so I may as well spend it all now, I don't think they're really being honest with themselves. And a good advisor will have that difficult conversation. I try to do it gently, but through those same sort of storytelling of how do you think 10 years ago, 20 years ago you would feel about today, and then extend that into the future.
So I like that. And I think I want to put it as like a 10-year rule kind of thing. So where you were 10 years, where you are now, and where you want to see yourself in 10 years. And based on make those smart and aware choices to kind of make sure that you go. Those are two key words, and I like the fact that you kind of highlighted those two, because it really does come down to remembering that you have the choice and to be aware of your finances and be aware of how you want to kind of spend them from there on in.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and to the point of buying a house and whatnot. So again, at the beginning of the call, I did mention I'm out here in Toronto. And Toronto is probably known as one of the worst, like we have the worst housing bubble in all of North America. I was reading in this one article, and it's really, really, really bad. Now, it might not be the case for everybody else, but I kind of want to gauge your rules of thumb around putting a down payment on a house. So, that's a big, big purchase. What are kind of steps that someone can take to, make it a more easier experience when it comes to finances?
Yeah, definitely. And I will say that it's the same circumstance with looking towards the future, that, wow, the housing market is really tough right now. I'll tell you a real honest truth is it isn't going to get any cheaper. So unless you live in a community that has fluctuations in the economy and real struggles, it's only going to get more expensive. So if you do want to get into the housing market, starting now is the best time to do so. And just like I said, finding an advisor you trust, I always recommend people to start working with a mortgage broker as soon as they can. A good mortgage broker, someone that you trust, will start to tell you some of the specifics about the province that you live in and the rules around mortgages that are specific to each province. But a good mortgage broker will help you with some of the choices that you're making about saving for a house before you screw it all up and make it too difficult. A good mortgage broker will often complain about how people phoned up and said, we found this house on the internet, we'd really like to buy it, can we come and meet with you? And they're not going to be in a position to do it because they didn't put the structural components in place first. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, so definitely start working with a mortgage broker if you're serious. The rules of thumb are not really rules of thumb as much as they are actual contractual obligations. You have to have a minimum of 5% down on a house, so 5% of the house value, in order to even be considered for financing for that. So there's something called a stress test that will determine what your loan to value on the house, as well as your ability to pay for the mortgage. And the bank will often say, if you go in and get pre-approved for a mortgage, the bank will often say, here's how much the maximum you can qualify for. What they really mean is, here's the most money I'm legally allowed to lend you. It isn't a reflection on your ability to pay. It's a reflection on the financial institution's ability to give you money. So 5% down is the minimum, but if you have less than 20%, then you're subject to what's Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation's mortgage failure insurance. So that's an additional premium on top of your mortgage that CMHC will charge you for, because you are a poor loan. Essentially, they're afraid that because you've only got 5 or 10% down on the house, that if it comes to it, you could just walk away, and then the bank is stuck with paying the mortgage for that. So I would say, look to being able to have at least 20% down, so that you are not subject to that CMHC financing.
Okay.
But coming back to our wheel here and being responsible about it, I'll also say to people, great, you figured out that you've saved $65,000 that you can put down, and that's going to give you a mortgage of $1,100 a month, which you can now afford. Mm-hmm. But buying a house and the mortgage, that's only a portion of the costs that are going to be there, because now you've got house insurance, property tax, maintenance and upkeep. Owning a house is much more expensive than just being able to get in the front door. So working with your mortgage broker and with your financial advisor, you can develop a plan to determine how much can I actually afford to buy that I can afford to live in as well.
Yeah, no, I sense like a big takeaway here, and when it comes to buying basics, and that's really trusting individuals, whether it's your financial advisor or broker. It's really finding the right individuals to work with when you're making such big choices. So that's a big takeaway that I'm seeing here. So that is really important. Sorry.
Yeah, and it won't cost anything. I always feel so badly when I know a couple who they were renting and they were having a great life and they were enjoying themselves and they were building towards their future, and they bought a house that they just couldn't quite afford, and then they became what we call house rich but cash poor. They couldn't afford to actually enjoy themselves, and then you put the stress of having a baby on top of that and an early part of the career. It is not easy to move forward as a family when you've got financial stresses. Even if they are positive financial stresses, because home ownership can be very satisfying, but it isn't always the right time if it's going to leave you have too many sleepless nights every month because you're not quite sure how you're going to pay the bills.
Yeah, no, and I did read something out there. I can't recall exactly how much the time fold, but basically, if you're purchasing a house, it could only be like, let's say, 3 times the amount of your partner's and yourself's salary combined or something. You don't want to pass that. You don't want to take on more than you need to, which is a good way to kind of put on.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and you can also be creative. It's traditionally we look for places where there's a suite so that you can have additional income. But I've had clients, one in particular, he really wanted to get into buying a house. He's a single guy, and he managed to save enough money for the down payment. But instead of living in the house and renting out the suite, he lived in the suite and rented out the rest of the house. Oh. So a family moved in, and they paid more than the mortgage was being paid just from the people upstairs, and it allowed him to increase his savings to the point where he was finally able to leverage and take over the upstairs portion.
Yeah, definitely.
But that's another good option.
Yeah, no, and you got to get creative when it comes down to these kinds of things, for sure.
Definitely.
I know that, there's so much to talk about, but we are at our 5-minute mark, and there was a question that I had received from a university student on the side. So it was, how many credit cards is a good number for the average individual? Like 3, 2, just 1 credit card, or what are your thoughts on that?
It depends on what the objective is. If the objective is to manage your spending, have as few as possible so that you're not maxing one out and then rolling over onto the other. If you're looking to establish a good credit rating, 2 is pretty good. Anything more than that, then, by my understanding, it does impact your credit rating. If you've got a store credit card, and then a Visa and an American Express, and I have 2. I use one for my domestic purchases and then one for my business purchases.
That's a good way to actually. That's a good tip. Okay.
But yeah, I think for a young person to have even more than one can be problematic, because you tend up, well, I have nothing left on this card, but I've got $1,000 left on this card, so I'll just keep pushing the problem off to the next month.
No, for sure. I thought it was an important question because, when I remember when I first went to university, one of the first things that university students get exposed to is all the credit cards kind of thing going on too. So I remember some of my friends going into it, but I really only had the one. So, and still only have the one personally. So it's just a matter of, I guess, what your purposes are and how many you really need to pay to. So that's great.
And pay it off. Pay it off every month.
Yeah. Keep that good credit score for sure.
Yeah.
Folks, if you have any questions, please feel free to put it into the comment box or your little Q&A feature at the bottom of your Instagram live. Mike's here. We just got that one question in right now, so I'll keep my eye open. I see Christy. Christy's going to do that. Awesome.
So if I'll jump in here. One of the questions I get asked is, why would I work with a financial advisor if I've only got $25 left over every month? And that's kind of the same sort of question that you would ask at the beginning, like, what's the point? But it's amazing what you can do with $25, first of all. But even more than that, by getting into the habit of saving $25 a month, next year that becomes $40 a month. And the year after that, it becomes $100 a month. And you start to flex that financial muscle. But the longer that you wait in order to do that, the longer you're putting off being able to get to a point where you're saving $500 a month on a regular basis.
No, for sure. That's actually, I like that flex your financial muscle term right there. I just kind of keep it building from there. That's a really good way to put it. I see that we've got a question here from Lucas. Any tips for spending during the holidays? Usually most consumers tend to go overboard with buying gifts. I know I'm one of those people. So what are your tips, Mike?
Well, I would have fewer friends.
Okay, I can't start there. I can't cut off anybody.
Yeah. So, this is an old circumstance. Very often it's really just about setting a budget. So I'm going to spend $250 on Christmas this year, and that's it. And then from that, you allocate. Are you spending the same on everybody? Are you spending a little bit more for family members and a little bit less for friends? It's been my experience that generally people don't care how much money you spend on them, and if they do care about it, they probably shouldn't be on your Christmas list. But it is very easy to try and go overboard. So before you start working on Christmas spending done, definitely set a budget. There's nothing wrong with handmade things, baked things. They mean just as much, if not more so, to people, especially if they're personal.
That's very true. It's actually a good way to kind of go about it. Yeah, simple but brilliant ideas, definitely, Christy, right there. I know we've got one more question here. It comes from Peel Halton. Are you able to see that? Oh.
Lucas asks, any tips for holiday spending? I see that one.
Alrighty, well, and Mike's response was to have fewer friends, but no, I'm just kidding. Just have a budget. Budget, for sure. I do come from a big family, so I have to make sure the budget makes sense too, right? So we'll see how that goes this year.
Yeah.
But
so do you and your siblings, do you coordinate and say we're all going to go together on a gift for parents, or how do you do that?
We've done that before, and sometimes it just depends on the year. My family, we like to do basically, I've got 2 other siblings, and we do a little draw where each one of us we buy a gift for. I mean, we're only 3 really, so what are the options at the end of the day? Who's buying, right? But we spent a bit of a budget really when it comes down to the gifts. It's true. It really does come down to that limit. Even when my friends and I do Secret Santa, and I'm sure that whether other friend groups or family groups do this too, there is always that max spend, and you kind of just put it together.
Yes.
It's really just a chance for everybody to kind of get together, holiday spirit and everything. So yeah. Definitely. Well, Mike, we are at basically our 3:30 time. This was fantastic.
Okay.
I have so many other questions, but we'll probably take it offline. But folks, thank you so much for joining, and for everybody that's going to be watching the replay, thank you for also watching the replay. Any questions, you can feel free to let us know on our Instagram pages, our Twitter, our LinkedIn, our Facebook. Everything is at our link tree at our bio and on our Instagram profile. There's my.
And I will send you this.
Thank you so much, folks. Make sure to
You're welcome.
www.financialliteracyforallweb.com, and we look forward to seeing you next week. Mike, thank you.
Okay.
Cheers. Take care.
Bye.